one of the things that oftentimes happens for many people, I know it happened for me at least, is one of the things that even pulled me into the spiritual path was, having an emotional crisis. I was having a lot of challenges and relationship problems and a lot of that were really weighing on me. And of course, it was a turning point for me in my own personal growth and my own spiritual growth as well. But, stepping into that level of emotional pain, especially without really having a deeper understanding or tools of how to deal with it. I was, as many people would be, introduced on the spiritual path or on a path of healing to the understanding that the the experiences of suffering that I was having, the pain that I was experiencing, were things that were happening inside of me that we can give lots of labels to. Childhood wounds, karmic patterns, various different ways that we can describe what those things are. But there are these parts of us, the shadow parts of ourselves. There's all these ways to label it. But that there are these parts of us that we, of course, can experience the real pain of. We can start to understand and learn that, the true source, the true cause of those challenges we're experiencing and the pain that we're experiencing are from the wounds, the patterns, the karmic patterns, or whatever we want to call them. And so the, understanding then is shared that understandably that what we need to do is to try to help clear out those old wounds. We need to try to help clear out those old patterns. And one of the things that I know happened for me, and I see a lot of times happening with other people as well, again, early in it, is that we start to experience this idea that in order for me to stop feeling all this emotional pain, I need to remove all of these wounds. And therefore, we become hyper vigilant about the idea of removing these wounds. I know, again, this is something that really happened to me a lot. And so, I think about it in the way that we sometimes can create this sort of common spiritual struggle, especially in the early stages, of the internal wounds and the patterns become perceived as some sort of enemy, as something that we're battling against. And so, I just ask, have you ever felt like you're in constant battle with your inner wounds or patterns? Maybe not now, but in the past, maybe still now, who knows? But there can be this experience where we're just always looking for there being something that we need to fix, or we need to do something with, or some cause for the thing that we're experiencing because we don't like what we're experiencing. And so, how many of us can start our spiritual journey, with hope that we're going to experience the deeper peace, we're going to experience, higher levels of consciousness and bliss and all these other things that are actually possible, but only to find ourselves trapped in a maze of our own wounds and our patterns, mistakenly turning them into enemies in a battle that we never really intended to fight. I know I did this. I can remember during that time that I started sharing about emotional crisis, personal crisis, relationship crisis, that everything that happened to me around that time, every time I got upset, every time I cried, every time my feelings were hurt, every time I got angry, every time I felt like I was being mistreated, I would run into my room and try to do some sort of clearing. I would try to, heal my inner child. I would try to, release the anger. I would try, like I was constantly looking for ways to get out of the thing that I was experiencing because I thought that I needed to get rid of all of this stuff, that I needed to heal it. And in a practical sense, yes, we do need to heal these things. But going about it that way sets us up for failure because we're fighting against it. We're turning it into a battle. And so we want to be able to find a different way to work with this. Now, one of the things that I know also I experience, and I think becomes part of the background of why people really get into this mindset, is some of the popular sort of mainstream kind of teachings, things like, I create my own reality, for instance. And so, we have this idea of the law of attraction, that I create my own reality, that my thoughts are creating my experience. And there is a level of truth to those ideas when we start to really unpack what it's intending. But when we add it to that idea that there's something wrong with me that I have to fix, then we can also use that intended helpful idea as a way of blaming ourselves for the experiences that we're having. That the pain I'm experiencing is because I
Mm-hmm.
had the wrong thoughts, that I was unable to clear out some particular wound, that I'm the one that's the problem and I'm creating this particular challenge for myself. And so it becomes this kind of self-perpetuating thing where we start to see ourselves as quit and that there's something wrong with us. And so, I ask again, like, hopefully, or not necessarily hopefully, but maybe you've experienced things like this. It's like, how has either now or in the past the idea of creating your own reality influenced your perceptions of the challenges and the healing process that you've had? Or what other beliefs do you hold about the source of your challenges, your wounds, or your role in the healing process that may be getting in the way of a smoother process or an easier process of healing? And so, while the idea of creating our reality is empowering, it also can lead us down that path of self-blame and make us feel responsible for every challenge. And the belief that we're creating our own reality can also be empowering. Um, but it has that shadow side to it, and it can lead us to a place where that self-blame becomes our default response to every challenge, that we're trapped in this cycle of perceived inadequacy. And likewise, one of the common philosophies that I still hear a lot of, that my soul chose this experience, for instance, or that we're suffering through some lesson that is penance for some negative behavior that we did in a past life. And so there are all these ways that we can start to sort of justify it, sometimes even sort of develop a spiritual ego around how much suffering we're having. That I'm suffering this much because I am on this deep spiritual path, and this is the dark night of the soul, and I must go through this journey as a martyr. And it doesn't have to be that way. And those principles, those ideas can really distract us from what's actually helpful for us. And so, as I explained in my story earlier, the mistake actually is getting in this trap of constantly focusing on clearing our wounds, which can create a perpetual cycle of problem-focused living. And if we think that there's any relevance to the idea of law of attraction and we create our own reality, one is often also talked about is the thing that you focus on is the thing that you're going to get more of. And so in this way of thinking and understanding, the more we focus on the problems, the challenges, the belief that something's wrong with us, the more stuck we actually become instead of actually freeing ourselves. And so the question then becomes, like, in what way might constant self-analysis and clearing work become counterproductive to our spiritual growth? And so in our quest for healing, we might get caught in a loop where we're always looking for something within us to fix, which can keep us stuck in the very pattern that we're actually trying to escape. And our focusing or fixing ourselves becomes a never-ending journey. It's trying to smooth out, waves on the ocean. It's impossible for us to do that. We're not going to be able to ever get out of that cycle. And so we also want to just recognize that, this way of thinking can open us up to also to manipulation by other people, and internal self-manipulation as well. The belief that we need to clear our blocks to become what we or others think that we're supposed to be, can lead us away from our true selves and into that cycle of self-doubt, control. And I've witnessed this happening in spiritual communities that I was part of in my earlier days. I still see lots of stories around of this, and I think actually a lot of the cancel culture and the shaming that happens on the social media right now is kind of based a little bit in this, but it happens in various different ways. But there are people who don't understand the deeper dynamic. They're really believing that that there's this battle happening against our wounds, and that we must be clearing these things out and doing our work in order for us to be able to evolve and to be better people and more than blah, blah, blah. And again, we do need to do the work, but there's a way to go about it that doesn't involve all this dynamic that we're talking about. So there are times that I experience in social communities that I still see where various people will address conflicts by simply telling the other person that they have a wound that they need to deal, that there's some shadow part of them that is causing this whole problem, and asserting that the other person is at fault because they need to do the healing work to heal their shadow. And it's a potential way of denying any kind of responsibility on our own side for what role we may be playing in a dynamic. And this is not a proper or healthy way to understand the path of healing or our wounds, or how we might go about a process of removing karmic patterns. So the solution to all of this is to find a balanced approach to healing that emphasizes self-acceptance and the recognition of our inherent wholeness. And so from this point of view, true healing actually comes from an understanding that we are not broken. And that is one of the biggest sort of unspoken, even if people don't think about it when they're going through that cycle that I described, there is a feeling that something's wrong with me that needs to be fixed. That if I'm able to clear these things out, I'll finally be healed and healthy. And so it's not about that we're broken. We don't want to believe that we're broken. We want to get rid of the idea that we're broken, that there's something that needs to be fixed. It's instead about embracing our complete self with all the experiences and the insights that we have. The wounds are there. We don't want to deny them. We don't want to pretend they don't exist, but battling against them is not going to help us. And so the key to true healing lies in shifting our perspective from fixing ourselves, from battling against these wounds, these causes of challenges and problems and poor choices that we might make in life. And instead of fixing, we want to start to understand and to accept. It's about recognizing that our wounds and patterns are not flaws to be eradicated, but they're parts of our whole being that deserve compassion. And yes, as we bring awareness to them, as we work with them, there are patterns that might dissolve and shift, and that we might evolve and grow, and we might actually be more joyful and be more happy and be more compassionate and be more kind. But it's not because we waged a war against the pain that's inside of us. So this also means that we need to learn to see others as not broken and support them in reconnecting with their wholeness as well. And so that we want to transfer the way that we're learning to ourselves with kindness and compassion and acceptance, while also committing to a process of growing and evolving and taking responsibility for our behaviors and our actions and our lives. We want to be able to support others in doing the same, of helping them find acceptance for themselves, even in their moment of suffering and pain now, while also helping to support them in finding ways to become more connected to the wholeness that they already have, in the way that we want to learn to be more connected to our own wholeness as well. And so in this context, the people that we associate with, the friends we have, the spiritual friends we have, the communities that we hang out in, we're wanting to be able to find people that can support us in fostering that self-acceptance and recognizing our inherent wholeness. That this can be a segment where there's a valued of shared experience and mutual support that can really be emphasized. And so the success in all this is being able to embrace wisdom, self-acceptance, and self-love, while also taking responsibility for our lives. And this can lead to genuine growth and healing. And so when we shift from trying to fix ourselves and start embracing our whole selves, we unlock a more authentic and fulfilling path to growth. And so if we can imagine a world where each of us views our challenges not as brokenness, but opportunities for growth and self-compassion, that this can become the foundation of an authentic healing process and transformation. And so we want to, in this context, start to think of each individual person, of course, including ourselves, as just a unique tapestry. There are all these different threads of experience that include our wounds and our joys that are woven together that create this beautiful sort of complex wholeness. And it's also a living being, a living process. And so it evolves. And so, yes, just like the tree throws off its leaves at the end of the season, or some trees throw off their leaves at the end of the season, as part of a cyclamation and growth and death and rebirth, if you want to look at it that way, there are going to be times that within our own lives, we throw off the things that no longer serve us. And so sometimes those wounds that we've been talking about come up as the thing that doesn't serve us. And there are kind and compassionate ways for us to be able to make that transformation and to allow natural growth to happen instead of fighting against it and wanting it to be different.